is Nick Faraclas. I'm a professor at the University of Puerto Rico in the Rio Piedras campus. I work there at the university, but also work around the Caribbean. Here in Curaçao, also in Aruba, in Haiti, in Honduras, and many other countries in the Caribbean region on the teaching of children in their own languages. It's a big problem in the Caribbean because there are many children who go to school, but they're taught in a language that's not their own. Their first language of reading and writing is not their own. So I work with communities around the Caribbean on this particular issue. And before I got here to the Caribbean, I was in the South Pacific in Papua New Guinea for 15 years. Before that, I worked in West Africa for 5 years, in Nigeria and in a few countries around Nigeria. And I've also worked in Europe on these issues and in Latin America as well.
What is the importance of a language?
Language is the basis of many things. It's the basis of your culture. It's also the basis of your identity. So it's not just the words, it's also your personality. It's how you identify. It's who you think you are. This is all bound up with language. So it's very, very important that children have a chance in school to learn in their own language. If they learn in their own language, then they have confidence and a belief in their own identity and their own culture. But if children are forced to learn in another language and learn about other cultures than their own first, then they develop more of a negative attitude towards their language, a negative attitude towards their culture. This affects their identity. It makes them less confident as learners, less confident as people who can actually perform in a competent way in a very competitive marketplace. So language is really the basis for everything in education. If you start education in a language that's familiar to the students, like Papiamentu here in Curaçao, then you're really giving the students a foundation for succeeding for all of the rest of their academic careers. But unfortunately, if students are being taught in a language that's not their own, that they're not competent in when they get to school, then there's a big problem because they're not going to have the foundation that they need for academic success, to do well in school and to really participate in the competitive globalized workforce in the future.
How do you experience Papiamentu as a language?
Papiamentu is a wonderful language. Bos dushi Papiamentu. I'm learning it, mitasinya Papiamentu, tiki tiki, but I still have a way to go before I can do an interview like this in Papiamentu. But in any case, Papiamentu is a wonderful language. It's a language that has a long history, very rich tradition, and it's a language just like any other language. It's a Creole language, which means it has different inputs. It has the words mainly come from Spanish and Portuguese. The grammar mainly comes from West Africa. So this is something very special about Curaçao. Curaçao has many different traditions coming together, many different cultures coming together, many different languages coming together. And this is a real strength of Curaçao. It's a plurilingual, pluricultural, and pluri-identified country. And unfortunately, though, in the schools right now, people are not taking advantage of that advantage that you have. You have a great resource here of children who come to school speaking Papiamentu, but also with a good competence, a fairly good competence in English and a fairly good competence in Spanish. There are very few places in the world where you have children coming to school with a competence in 3 different languages. So basically, what you could be doing here in Curaçao is using those competences that your children have in Papiamentu and English and Spanish to produce a workforce that's going to be the kind of pluricultural workforce, multicultural, multilingual workforce that we're going to need in the 21st century.
Why are people from Curaçao unique regarding languages?
Yes, well, it's just this, that you can see people in Curaçao at one moment speaking Papiamentu, another moment speaking English, another moment speaking in Spanish, another moment speaking in Dutch. This means that people in Curaçao are equipped to deal with the different types of players that are going to be playing in a globalized economy and a globalized world. Okay, so actually in Curaçao, I see a great potential that you have something that very few other countries have. You have a country where people have this ability to function in many different languages, many different cultures. And so what we are trying to do in our work in the ABC Islands, that is in Curaçao, Aruba, and Bonaire, we're trying to build on that foundation that you have in this ability to communicate in different languages and to function in different cultures, and do that in such a way in our schools, in your schools, to make sure that your students are using those abilities to the maximum so that they become good cultural and linguistic negotiators in the future, and can get the kind of good jobs that those kinds of competencies will give them.
Could you share, please, other experiences with other countries?
Yes, okay. Actually, you here in Curaçao and the other ABC Islands, that is Aruba and Bonaire, you're very far ahead of other countries. You may not think you are, but you are. You already have Papiamentu as an official language, which is very, very good. You already have a policy, a language policy. You already have an orthography. You have an educational policy. You already have training for teachers all the way up to the BA and then to the masters. So right now, I'm working at doing some support work at UNA for their master's program in Papiamentu, Spanish, English, and Dutch. So basically, in terms of Papiamentu, in terms of Curaçao, you've come a long way. You have teacher training, you have materials, you have groups like the Fundación para Planificación de Idioma that are producing so many materials, other groups as well producing materials, and you have awareness. The public in Curaçao is very much more accepting and very much more proactive about Papiamentu than in other countries, although maybe not as much as they need to be. There's still work to be done there, but still you've come a long way, and you should all congratulate yourselves for what you've done so far, and you should be using that as a foundation to take it even further.
How do you experience the development of languages in their surroundings?
Yes, okay. Children learn to read and write only once in their lifetime. Children should be taught to read and write in the language that they know best. Okay, this means that children in Curaçao should be learning to read and write in Papiamentu first, before they learn to read and write in any other language. Okay, and this is not making the children turn in on themselves, it's actually helping the children to open themselves out to the rest of the world. Because if you learn to read in Papiamentu first, you learn to write in Papiamentu first, then you become strong in your own language, you become strong in your own culture. If you're strong in your own language, if you're strong in your own culture, then you have the confidence to go on to learn other languages, like English, like Spanish, like Dutch. So what we have found is that students who come to school and they're forced to learn Dutch first, and they're forced to learn to read and write in Dutch first of all, they can't catch up with the Dutch. A few can, but most cannot, because it's not their language, okay? So many start to fail, and once you start failing in school, it's very hard to catch up again. So most of the students in Curaçao are not being given the chance they need because they're being taught in a language that's not their own. That's the problem at the level of their thinking and their cognitive skills. But there's another problem. There's a problem in their feelings. Because if you're forced to learn to read and write and to go to school and your subjects in school to learn them in another language, then chances are that language is going to become one that you don't like. It's going to be a language that you have negative feelings towards. We don't want the students to hate Dutch. We want the students to love Dutch. But by forcing the students to learn all their subjects in Dutch from the beginning and to learn reading and writing in Dutch from the beginning gives them a negative attitude towards Dutch. So many Curaçaoan students don't see Dutch as a nice language, as a language that they experience positively. They see Dutch as a language that they experience negatively. Now, what we have found is, for example, in Aruba, we're working in a project called the Proyecto Escola Multilingual. In that project, the students start in Papiamentu. Papiamentu is the language that they learn in the Kleuterschool and in the first few years of the primary school. And they learn to read and write in Papiamentu first. So by the time they've got to the first year of the primary school, they're reading and writing in Papiamentu. They feel good about Papiamentu. They feel good about their own culture. They feel good about their own people. They feel good about themselves. They've got that confidence. Then we let them learn to read and write in Dutch in the second grade of primary school. And then you see the big difference. By then they love Dutch. They want to read in Dutch. They want to write in Dutch. They have a whole new attitude. So when we talk to the parents, when we talk to the teachers, They say they've never seen the children so alive in the classroom. They've never seen the children so enthusiastic, not just about Papiamentu and not just about learning, but also about Dutch. They're starting to enjoy it. So for them now, these new children who aren't forced to learn in Dutch first, but learn in Papiamentu first, for them Dutch becomes not a language that they experience negatively, it becomes a language they experience positively. But in Aruba, they're not just teaching Dutch from the beginning and Papiamentu, they're teaching English and Spanish as well. So those students learn to read and write in Papiamentu in grade 1, to read and write in Dutch in grade 2, to read and write in English in grade 3, to learn to read and write in Spanish in grade 4. So by the time they're finished with their primary school, they're reading and writing in 4 different languages. But from the beginning in Kleuterschool, they learn in Papiamentu, but they also are singing and playing and doing fun things in Dutch, English, and Spanish. So by the time it comes time for them to learn to read and write in those languages that are not their own languages, they have enough understanding of those languages and they have enough of a positive attitude about those languages that they can go on to learn to read and write in Dutch, read and write in English, read and write in Spanish very well. So this is the type of program that you could have here in Curaçao as well, where you're really equipping your students for the world of the future. Because the world of the future is a world where you're going to have to be able to go to China and feel comfortable there and speak their language. You're going to have to go to Saudi Arabia and speak their language. You're going to have to go to Europe and speak Dutch. You're going to have to go to North America and speak English. You're going to have to go to Venezuela and speak Spanish. These are the kinds of Curaçaoans who are going to get very good jobs, going to get have a very bright future in the 21st century.
What are the advantages of multilinguistic people?
Yes, multilingual people are the people of the future. And unfortunately, many countries are not encouraging it. So if you go to the United States, they're not encouraging foreign languages. You go to Europe now, people are turning more and more to their own language. They're not talking so much about other languages anymore. So really, in the future, they're going to have to come to Curaçao to find the people who can speak all those different languages. You're going to need people who feel comfortable speaking many different languages. So this is a real resource that you have in Curaçao. You have one of the key resources you have in Curaçao is the fact that your people are exposed to English, Spanish, and Papiamentu from very young, and Dutch as well. So this gives them a basis for becoming the kind of multilingual people, the kind of multicultural and multi-identified equipped people that you're going to need in the future. I've just come from St. Croix. St. Croix was the island where there was the biggest petrol refinery for oil, for gas, in the Caribbean. They've just shut down their refinery. Refineries are being shut down. This refinery in Curaçao, I hope it will be here for the future, children. But if it's not here, what are they going to do? How are they going to get good paying jobs? It's not going to be in a hotel making a bed. It's not going to be in a supermarket. It's going to have to be in a job where there's going to be an international demand for them. And internationally, there's a big demand for people who can function competently, not just in one language, but 2 or 3 or 4 languages. These are the people they're going to be looking for in the future. These are the people, these are the kind of competences. These are the kind of skills that your children are going to need for the future, and you've already got all the basis for it right here in Curaçao. But what's happening is you're not taking that, you're not using those resources. The children come to school with Papiamentu, instead of using Papiamentu to give them a further competence, it's being thrown out the window and you're trying to force them to learn another language. No, give them a good foundation in Papiamentu, in their own language, their own culture. They can use that to get a good foundation in English, Spanish, and other languages. So this is how you create a multilingual workforce. You create it not through forcing other languages on the students academically from the beginning. You create it by giving students a good sense of their own confidence in their own language and their own culture, and then use that confidence for them to learn other languages. So the best way to get Curaçaoan students to learn Dutch is to do it through Papiamentu. The best way to get them to learn English is to do it through Papiamentu. The best way to get them to learn Spanish is to do it through Papiamentu. So Papiamentu is the key, but it's not the end. Okay, Papiamentu is the beginning. It's what opens the doors for all of the other things. So as long as the students continue being proud of their own culture, being proud of their own language, and gaining skills in their own language to continue on in school and for academic success, they can transfer all of that to the other languages, to Dutch, to English, and to Spanish.
¿Qué sería su mensaje para Curazao?
Bueno, mi mensaje para Curazao es empezar a aprovechar de los recursos lingüísticos, de los recursos culturales que tienen sus niños. Los niños de ustedes son ya plurilingües cuando llegan a la escuela. Tienen una destreza muy desarrollada, por ejemplo, en Papiamentu. Ustedes tienen que aprovechar de esta destreza de construir una fundación muy sólida de la parte de sus niños en su propia cultura, en su propia lengua. Eso no para cerrar sus niños, no, para abrir sus niños, para que sus niños tengan una confianza sólida en su propia cultura, sólida en su propia lengua, y para que puedan transferir esta fundación sólida en su propia cultura y su propia lengua a otras culturas y otros idiomas como el inglés, el español y el holandés. Entonces, con la meta de producir niños, de los niños del futuro, los niños que pueden hacer todo lo necesario para tener éxito en el mundo del futuro, un mundo donde la gente que tiene destrezas en muchos idiomas va a ser la gente que va a ganar en la competencia internacional en un mundo globalizado.
Our next interview will be with you in Papiamentu.
Hopi bom. Masha danki. Te adoro.